Welcome to this week's episode of Insight. During this week's show, we're going to cover three items. The first one is going to be the continuing fallout and the back and forth from the so-called Armenia-Azerbaijan peace agreement. Then we're going to move on to a very interesting tweet by the U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz demanding the freedom for our hostages in Baku. And we're going to close with some interesting business news coming out of Armenia. If we listen to all the pronouncements coming out of high-ranking Azeri officials or the dictator himself who's running Baku, what they're doing is they're putting in all kinds of extra conditions and matters that were simply not in the document that they had agreed to. What we do know for sure is that nothing is going to be signed. All that is going to change is the platform of the disagreements is going to move from we won't agree to anything to now we've agreed to it, but we won't sign it. Just to show the level of farce that this has descended into, we have had countless interviews and speeches by the dictator in Baku, during which he has demanded the extradition of former Armenian presidents to Baku for his Nuremberg II trials, as he called it, and has demanded that Armenia dismantle all of our new defensive fortifications. He's accused countless very high-ranking U.S. officials of being on the payroll of the Armenians, whatever that means. He's accused the EU monitors of trying to enter his country via their border mission. And once again, he's demanding the Putin corridor via Sunik. And we have to understand what this means because it's becoming clear that when they agreed to the ethnic cleansing and the Russian sign-off on the ethnic cleansing in Artsakh, what the dictator in Baku promised his friend in Russia is the Putin corridor through Sunik, because if you're going to enforce November 9th, that road will be controlled by the Russian secret services, the FSB. So this is a promise that he wants to fulfill to his friend. Then he went on to accuse the United States State Department of sabotaging his disastrous COP29 event. And this, more dangerously, has actually moved on the last 5 or 6 days, almost on a daily basis, with false claims of shooting on the Armenian-Azeri border. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to study the specific landmines that the regime in Baku is going to use to blow up any agreement now or in the future. The first one is going to be the Border Demarcation Commission, which they have agreed to and is actually in place. What they will do is they will make sure that the demarcation never gets to the areas that they're actually occupying significant parts of our territory. So they'll be demarcating areas that they're not occupying, and they will refuse to do so when it gets to areas that they are occupying. And this will obviously, they've dragged this on for years. The second point in the poison pill is going to be the demanding of the constitutional change in Armenia. And this is supposed to be voted on in 26. And obviously, their demands, his specific demand for the change in the constitution, will essentially kill it politically in Armenia because it would make it the Aliyev constitutional change. The third one is the demand for the EU monitors to leave the border. And the dispute's going to be on, the text says forces, while the EU monitors are obviously not forces. So according to Armenia, the EU border monitors stay because they're simply not forces, while the other side will definitely demand that for them to leave. What all of this means is that given the very intense and active international statements from all parties, even neutral ones, demanding or praising both sides for agreeing to this peace agreement, it's going to make short-term aggressions very hard. But it's really not going to change the long-term calculus. We should be expecting some kind of an aggression later on this year, for the simple reason that the Baku regime cannot exist without an Armenian enemy and aggression. All of this means is that nothing is going to be signed. And actually the only thing that will bring us peace is military upgrades, as we are doing now, except doing them faster and doing more of them. And a very concerted program to delegitimize, criminalize, and marginalize the regime in Baku. That is the only way for us to achieve peace, and not through any signed agreements. Let's move on to the second topic of the week, which is an interesting tweet from the National Security Advisor for Donald Trump, Mike Waltz, in his tweet, he demanded for the Baku regime to sign the peace agreement. And more importantly, he demanded the regime to free our hostages. This is actually the first time that any U.S. official has actually outlined this in public. Now, why is this important? It's important in the broader scheme of things, given the fact that everyone is expecting him to actually sign this peace treaty, and he's not going to do it. Having an official of his level, and for people who don't know what this position means, is essentially there's two top foreign policy positions in the United States, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. So this is essentially Donald Trump's right-hand person. He's actually quite important and quite critical. This is part of the process of cornering and delegitimizing the leader in Baku, because if a person of his caliber is actually asking for this, it's of much higher value than other people and institutions. The last item we're going to actually review is some interesting business news coming out of Armenia on different sectors. We got reports that the banking sector actually made $923 million in profits last year, which is almost doubling of what they did 2 years ago. Then you're looking at the IT sector and IT exports that actually exceeded $2.3 billion last year. Furthermore, on the mining sector, and this is quite important because we have this essentially a large program of mining for security, which is actually becoming international now with what's going on in Ukraine and other places. Armenian government actually decided to grant a $150 million loan to an American company on the Amosar gold mine, which is run by a U.S.-Canadian concern. Then we move on to sort of the black sheep of Armenian businesses, which is the gaming industry. And the reason this came up in parliament is that they were actually passed legislation to double the tax on the gaming industry. But while all of these discussions were going on, some very interesting figures came out that frankly have not been outed before. And that is the gaming industry in Armenia, and there's a couple of big gaming firms, actually grossed $15.8 billion, which is a huge amount of money for a country like Armenia. And if you do the math, it likely means that they have a profit margin of somewhere in the $2 to $4 billion range. It's estimated that 90 to 95% of its revenue is actually international. It doesn't come out of Armenia. What is interesting is that not only are Armenian companies dominant in the gambling industry, but there's also Armenian companies like Digitane, which are actually doing the software for the gaming industry, which is becoming another part of that industry that's growing very significantly. In conclusion, there's a big taboo about talking about the gaming industry in Armenia, which I think obviously has tremendous economic impact because people are somewhat embarrassed by it, that it's the black sheep of our businesses. But frankly, we have no such luxuries to have such moral qualms about anything. At the end of the day, our goal is to be rich, prosperous, and strong. We should not care about the color of the cat that catches that prosperity mouse. Thank you for joining me this week's Subscribe Insights.